Mommy, I made something for the judge. My daughter Sophie stood in the courthouse hallway, clutching her pink tablet like it held the secrets of the universe. Her blonde pigtails bounced as she looked up at me with those serious green eyes that reminded me so much of my own. Sweetheart, the judge is very busy, I said gently, straightening her dress. We can't bother him with videos right now. But it's important, she insisted, her small voice carrying that stubborn tone I recognized from myself. It shows the truth. My lawyer, Aaron Mitchell, was reviewing documents nearby. He glanced over with mild curiosity, but said nothing. We were minutes away from the final hearing, where my soon-to-be ex-husband would likely charm the judge just as he'd charmed everyone else for years. Sophie tugged my sleeve. Promise you'll let me show it, Mommy. Promise. I knelt down, meeting her gaze. Something in her expression stopped my automatic dismissal. This wasn't childish insistence. This was determination. Okay, baby. If there's a right moment, we'll try. She nodded, satisfied, and clutched that tablet even tighter. I had no idea that her little video would detonate like a bomb in that courtroom, destroying the carefully constructed lies that had nearly cost me everything. My name is Natasha Morrison, and 6 months ago, my husband of 8 years announced he wanted a divorce. Kenneth had always been charismatic, the kind of man who commanded attention when he entered a room. At 36, he still had that boyish charm that made people trust him instantly. I was 34, working as a pediatric nurse while raising Sophie. We'd built what I thought was a solid life in our suburban neighborhood. Kenneth worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveled frequently, and brought home a comfortable income. The divorce announcement came on a Tuesday evening. Sophie was at my mother's house for a sleepover. Kenneth sat me down in our living room, his face serious in a way I'd rarely seen. I'm not happy, Natasha. I haven't been for a long time. No warning, no marriage counseling suggestion, just a declaration that he was done. Within weeks, he'd filed papers. Within a month, he'd introduced Sophie to his girlfriend, Brittany, a 26-year-old dental assistant he'd apparently been seeing for over a year. The betrayal cut deep, but what came next cut deeper. Kenneth wanted primary custody of Sophie. He claimed I was unstable, too focused on work, unable to provide adequate care. His lawyer painted me as a negligent mother who prioritized her career over her child. The accusations started small, but grew increasingly vicious. Kenneth documented everything with the precision of someone who'd been planning this for months. He photographed the dishes in the sink after my 12-hour hospital shifts. He recorded Sophie saying she was hungry when I was running late from work. He compiled a list of school events I'd missed, conveniently omitting that I'd been covering for colleagues during the pandemic. His lawyer presented me as distracted, overwhelmed, and emotionally unavailable. Kenneth, meanwhile, positioned himself as the devoted father who attended every school function, helped with homework, and provided stability. What the court didn't know was that Kenneth's attentiveness had only started after he'd decided to leave. For years, I'd been the one handling doctor appointments, parent-teacher conferences, and bedtime routines while he traveled for work or stayed late at the office with Brittany. My lawyer, Aaron, was competent but cautious. These custody cases are difficult, he'd warned me. Fathers who ask for primary custody often get it, especially when they present well. And Kenneth presented very well. He wore expensive suits, spoke confidently, and had convinced his own family that I was the problem. Even his mother, who'd once called me her favorite daughter-in-law, now gave me cold stares at custody exchanges. What hurt most was watching Sophie navigate the chaos. She was only 6, trying to understand why Daddy didn't live with us anymore, and why some strange woman was suddenly trying to act like her mother. Brittany had immediately attempted to bond with Sophie, buying her expensive toys and taking her to theme parks. Kenneth documented every smile, every moment of apparent happiness, building his case that Sophie thrived in his care. I couldn't compete with weekend fun. I had real life, homework, vegetables for dinner, bedtime routines, and the exhaustion of single parenting while working full-time. Sophie started having nightmares. She'd wake up crying, asking if she'd done something wrong. I'd hold her, whispering reassurances while my own heart shattered. "Is Daddy mad at me?" she asked one night. "No, baby. Daddy loves you very much." "Then why doesn't he love you anymore?" I had no good answer. How do you explain adult dysfunction to a 6-year-old? How do you tell your daughter that sometimes people are selfish without making her fear she's unlovable? During this time, I noticed Sophie becoming quieter around Kenneth. She'd return from his weekends subdued, clutching her tablet. I'd asked what was wrong, but she'd just shake her head. "Nothing, Mommy. I'm just tired." 3 months before the final hearing, Kenneth escalated his campaign. He filed an emergency motion claiming I'd been drinking excessively and shouldn't have unsupervised access to Sophie. The accusation was absurd. I rarely drank, maybe a glass of wine once a month. But Kenneth had photos of empty wine bottles in my recycling bin, taken during his custody exchange pickups. What he didn't mention was that I'd hosted my mother's birthday party that weekend, with 15 relatives who'd consumed those bottles. Context didn't matter to his narrative. The emergency hearing was humiliating. I had to submit to a drug and alcohol evaluation, all of which came back completely clean. The judge dismissed Kenneth's motion, but seemed irritated with both of us. "I strongly suggest you two work out a reasonable custody arrangement," the judge had said sternly. "Otherwise, I'll make the decision for you, and neither of you may like the result." Kenneth's lawyer had smirked, clearly confident in their position. They had documentation, witnesses from Kenneth's family, and a narrative that painted him as the stable, responsible parent. I had the truth, but truth without evidence is just opinion. And my opinion was losing against Kenneth's manufactured story. Aaron pulled me aside after that hearing. "We need something concrete, Natasha. Character testimony isn't enough. Do you have anything that shows his actual parenting?" I started documenting everything, just as Kenneth had done to me. I photographed the homework I helped Sophie complete. I recorded her saying she missed our bedtime stories. I kept receipts from her doctor appointments, school supplies, and every expense Kenneth conveniently forgot to split. But documentation felt defensive. I was playing catch-up against someone who'd been strategizing for over a year. Sophie's behavior grew more concerning. She started asking strange questions about secrets and lies. "Mommy, if you know something bad, should you tell?" "That depends, sweetheart. What kind of bad thing?" She'd gone quiet, fidgeting with her tablet, just wondering. I'd tried to press gently, but she'd shut down. Whatever was bothering her remained locked inside her 6-year-old mind. Kenneth's weekends with Sophie became increasingly problematic. She'd return with expensive new clothes and toys, but also with a sadness I couldn't crack. Brittany was apparently trying very hard to win Sophie over, taking her for manicures and shopping trips. "Brittany says I can call her mom if I want to," Sophie reported one evening, her voice small. My stomach dropped. "Do you want to call her that?" Sophie shook her head firmly. "No, you're my mom, only you." At least I still had that, for now. 2 months before the final hearing, Kenneth played his MasterCard. He announced he was moving to a bigger house in an excellent school district with a yard and a neighborhood pool. He could provide Sophie with stability, space, and a 2-parent household. His lawyer filed supplemental documents emphasizing this upgraded living situation. Meanwhile, I was renting a modest 2-bedroom apartment, all I could afford on my nurse's salary after splitting marital assets. The comparison looked terrible on paper. Kenneth's new house versus my apartment. Kenneth's flexible work schedule versus my hospital shifts. Kenneth's support system, Brittany versus my solo parenting. Aaron tried to reassure me. "Judges consider the child's established routine and emotional bonds. Sophie's been primarily with you her whole life." But I could see doubt creeping into his expression. Kenneth was building an overwhelming case, and we had little to counter it with. I barely slept those months. I'd lie awake, running through every possible scenario, every argument, every way I might lose my daughter. The thought of Sophie living primarily with Kenneth, seeing her only every other weekend, felt like death. My mother tried to help, offering to testify about my parenting. But Kenneth's lawyer would just paint her as biased. We needed something objective, something undeniable. I just didn't know what. Then, 3 weeks before the final hearing, Sophie came to me with her tablet. "Mommy, can you help me make a video?" She'd been recording little things on that tablet for months, mostly harmless kid stuff. Her drawings, her stuffed animals, silly songs. I'd smile and watch, grateful she had creative outlets during this stressful time. "What kind of video, baby?" "A special one, for the judge." I'd laughed it off, assuming she wanted to make some cute plea about loving both parents. Kids' perspectives rarely held weight in court, but I saw no harm in letting her try. "Sure, sweetheart. What do you want to record?" She'd shaken her head. "Not now. I need to wait for the right time." Her serious expression had puzzled me, but I'd been too exhausted to push. I assumed she'd eventually show me some crayon drawing or sweet message. I had no idea what she'd actually been recording. No idea that my 6-year-old daughter had been quietly gathering evidence that would ultimately save us both. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Kenneth had clearly planned some dramatic presentation, judging by his lawyer's confident smirks during pre-hearing conferences. Whatever they had planned, I braced myself for another round of attacks on my character. The morning of the hearing, I woke at 5 a.m., my stomach churning with anxiety. Sophie was already awake, sitting on her bed with that pink tablet in her lap. "Big day, Mommy," she said quietly. "I know, baby." I sat beside her, smoothing her hair. "Remember, no matter what happens, I love you more than anything in the world." "I love you too." She hugged me tightly, then pulled back with that determined expression again. "Don't forget, I have something important for the judge." I'd nodded, assuming it was her comfort object, something to make her feel involved. Aaron had warned me that Sophie would likely be questioned by the judge in chambers, a standard practice in contested custody cases. We arrived at the courthouse an hour early. Kenneth was already there with Brittany, both of them dressed impeccably. Brittany wore a conservative dress and minimal makeup, clearly styled to look mature and motherly. Kenneth barely glanced at me, but he gave Sophie an enthusiastic greeting. "Hey, princess, ready for our big day." Sophie had responded quietly, clutching her tablet. Kenneth tried to take it from her. "Why don't you leave that with Mom? You won't need it inside." "No," Sophie pulled back, holding it close. "It's mine, I need it." Kenneth's smile tightened, but he didn't push. Brittany tried next, offering to hold it for her. "Sophie, honey, you really should leave electronics outside the courtroom," Brittany said in her sweetest voice. Sophie looked at me. I shrugged. "If it makes her feel better, I don't see the harm." Aaron nodded his agreement. "The bailiff will tell us if it's a problem." We entered the courtroom, and Sophie clutched that tablet like a lifeline. The judge, Honorable Franklin Pierce, was an older man with silver hair and a reputation for being fair but stern. Kenneth's lawyer, Veronica Hale, started strong. She presented their case methodically: Kenneth's stable home, his flexible schedule, his ability to provide enhanced opportunities for Sophie's development. She played video clips of Sophie laughing at Kenneth's house, swimming in their pool, playing with their dog. Every clip showed a happy child in an ideal environment. Then she attacked me. Late pickups from school, missed parent-teacher conferences, exhaustion affecting my parenting quality. She made my dedication to nursing sound like neglect. "Ms. Morrison prioritizes her career over her child's needs," Veronica concluded. "Mr. Morrison offers Sophie stability, attention, and a 2-parent household. The child's best interests clearly favor primary placement with her father." Aaron countered as best he could, emphasizing my bond with Sophie, my consistent care throughout her life, and the importance of maternal attachment. But I could see Judge Pierce's expression. He looked tired, like he'd heard these arguments 1,000 times before. Kenneth's case was simply stronger on paper. "I'd like to hear from the child," Judge Pierce announced. "Sophie, would you come forward?" Sophie clutched her tablet and walked to the witness stand. She looked so small sitting there, her feet dangling above the floor. "Hi, Sophie," the judge said gently. "I'm Judge Pierce. I just want to ask you a few questions. Is that okay?" Sophie nodded. "Do you love both your mommy and daddy?" "Yes, sir." "And they both take good care of you?" Sophie hesitated. That pause sent electricity through my nerves. "Daddy tries," she said carefully. Kenneth shifted in his seat. Veronica's confident expression faltered slightly. "What do you mean, tries?" the judge asked. "He's nice when people are watching," Sophie said in her small, clear voice. "But when it's just us, he's different." "Different how?" Sophie looked at me, then at her tablet. "Can I show you something, Mr. Judge? I made a video." Veronica stood immediately. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We haven't been provided any evidence." "It's my video," Sophie interrupted. "I made it myself. Nobody helped me." Judge Pierce studied her for a long moment. "What's in this video, Sophie?" "The truth," Sophie said simply. "The things Daddy didn't know I was recording." The courtroom went silent. Kenneth's face had gone pale. Brittany looked confused, but Kenneth knew. I could see it in his expression, sudden, dawning horror. "Your Honor," Veronica tried again, "we object to unvetted evidence." "I'll allow it," Judge Pierce said firmly. "If this child has something to show me, I'm going to watch it. Bailiff, please set up the screen." The courtroom had an overhead projector for evidence display. The bailiff helped Sophie connect her tablet, and within moments, her video was ready to play. Sophie pressed play, and the screen filled with a familiar scene, Kenneth's new house, specifically his living room. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. Kenneth's voice came through clearly. He was on the phone, his tone completely different from his courtroom demeanor. "Yeah, I'm not worried about the hearing. The judge will give me custody. Natasha looks terrible on paper." My breath caught. Sophie had recorded him. When? How? The video continued. Kenneth was apparently talking to someone, packing in his living room while Sophie, unbeknownst to him, had positioned her tablet to record from the couch. "I don't actually want full custody," Kenneth laughed. "But if I get it, the child support calculation flips. She'll owe me." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Pierce's expression hardened as he watched. On screen, Kenneth continued. "Brittany and I have plans. We want to travel, maybe move to California. A kid every week would complicate that. But if I have primary custody on paper, I can send Sophie to her mother whenever it's convenient and still collect the money." Veronica looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Kenneth stared at the screen in absolute horror. But the video wasn't finished. The scene changed to a different day, showing Kenneth and Brittany in the kitchen. "I don't even like kids," Brittany was saying. "I'm only doing this custody thing because you said it's temporary." "It is," Kenneth assured her. "Once the judge orders it, we can work out an arrangement where Natasha takes Sophie most of the time. We just need it to look good on paper." Sophie's small voice came from behind the tablet camera. "Daddy, can I have a snack?" On screen, Kenneth's expression transformed instantly into warm father mode. "Of course, princess. Come here, let me get you something." The contrast was chilling, his calculated manipulation versus his public persona. The video continued with more clips. Kenneth complaining about how expensive Sophie was. Brittany saying she hoped Sophie would choose to live with her mother anyway. Kenneth coaching Sophie on what to say during custody evaluations. "Remember, princess, tell them you like the new house better. Tell them Brittany is nice to you." Sophie's recorded voice uncertain. "But I miss Mommy's house." "I know, but we need you to say you like it here more. Can you do that for Daddy?" The video showed Sophie's confused little face as Kenneth pressured her to lie. There were more clips. Kenneth telling Sophie that her mother was too busy to spend time with her, planting seeds of doubt. Brittany complaining about having to babysit. Kenneth laughing with friends about manipulating the custody system. One particularly damning segment showed Kenneth 2 months earlier. before his emergency motion about my drinking. "I need something that'll make her look bad," Kenneth said on a phone call. "Maybe I can make it seem like she's drinking too much. Yeah, I can stage some photos." The courtroom had gone completely silent except for the video. Kenneth looked like he might vomit. His lawyer had her head in her hands. Judge Pierce's face was stone as he watched every second of Sophie's evidence. Finally, the video ended. Sophie stood there by the projection screen, small and brave. "I recorded everything," she said quietly. "For 3 months, Daddy didn't know I could turn on my tablet without sound. He didn't know I was listening." Judge Pierce sat back in his chair, his expression a mixture of anger and sadness. "Mr. Morrison," he said, his voice cold, "do you have anything to say?" Kenneth opened his mouth, but nothing came out. What could he say? His own words had condemned him completely. Veronica stood shakily. "Your Honor, I was completely unaware." "I'm sure you were, Counselor," Judge Pierce interrupted. "Sit down." He turned to Sophie. "Sweetheart, that was very brave of you. You did the right thing." Sophie nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I wanted to rush to her, but Aaron's hand on my arm stopped me. This wasn't over yet. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Pierce continued, "I've been a family court judge for 23 years. I've seen manipulation, I've seen lies, I've seen parents using their children as weapons. But I have rarely seen anything as calculated and cruel as what you just demonstrated." Kenneth finally found his voice. "Your Honor, I can explain." "Explain what? That your 6-year-old daughter is lying, that the video is doctored. Please enlighten me." Kenneth slumped in his seat. There was no explanation, no excuse that would work. Judge Pierce turned to me. "Ms. Morrison, I apologize that this court almost failed you and your daughter. The evidence presented initially was compelling, but it was also, as we now know, built on manipulation and fraud." I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face as years of stress, fear, and exhaustion finally broke through. Judge Pierce continued, "I'm granting you primary physical custody of Sophie, effective immediately. Mr. Morrison, you will have supervised visitation only, pending a full investigation into your conduct. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney's office for possible charges of perjury and fraud." Kenneth's face crumbled. "Please, Your Honor, she's my daughter." "She's a child you were willing to use as a financial pawn," Judge Pierce said sharply. "You don't get to claim fatherly love after what we just witnessed." He looked at Brittany, who'd been sitting frozen throughout the video. "Ms. Caldwell, I strongly suggest you reconsider your relationship with this man. Anyone willing to manipulate his own child is capable of manipulating anyone." Brittany stood and walked out without a word. Kenneth watched her go, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Aaron was grinning beside me, squeezing my shoulder. "You did it," he whispered. "Sophie did it." Judge Pierce addressed Sophie again. "Sweetheart, you're going home with your mommy today and you're going to stay with her. Does that make you happy?" Sophie nodded, wiping her tears. "Yes, Mr. Judge, that makes me very happy." As we left the courtroom, Sophie finally let me hold her. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing with relief. "I was so scared, Mommy," she cried. "I didn't know if the judge would let me show the video. I was scared Daddy would find out I was recording." "You were so brave, baby," I whispered, holding her tight. So brave, I'm so proud of you." Aaron walked with us to the courthouse exit, explaining what would happen next. Supervised visitation meant Kenneth would only see Sophie with a court-appointed monitor present. The investigation would likely uncover more of his manipulation tactics. "He's finished," Aaron said quietly. "No judge will ever grant him unsupervised custody after this, and if the DA presses charges, he could face serious consequences." Kenneth's family was waiting outside. His mother approached cautiously, her expression devastated. "Natasha, I'm so sorry," she said, tears in her eyes. "We believed him. We thought you were the problem. I can't believe my son would do something so horrible." I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to respond properly. Part of me wanted to be angry at them for believing Kenneth's lies, but they'd been manipulated too. "Can I still see Sophie?" his mother asked hesitantly. "I love her so much." I looked at Sophie, who nodded. "Grandma didn't know," she said simply. "She was nice to me." Over the following weeks, the full scope of Kenneth's deception became clear. The investigation revealed he'd manipulated documentation, staged photographs, and coached multiple people to lie on his behalf. His pharmaceutical sales job terminated his employment when the company learned he'd been using work time to plan his custody scheme. Brittany had indeed left him, posting on social media about escaping a narcissistic relationship. Kenneth moved back to a small apartment, his dreams of California and freedom evaporating with his reputation. Friends who'd supported him slowly learned the truth and distanced themselves. His supervised visitations with Sophie were awkward and strained. She'd agreed to see him, but kept her distance emotionally. She'd answer his questions politely, but never relaxed into the easy affection she'd once shown him. "I still love Daddy," she told me one night, "but I don't trust him anymore." It broke my heart that she had to learn such harsh lessons so young, but I was also amazed by her resilience and wisdom. "It's okay to love someone and still protect yourself from them," I told her. "That's actually very grown-up of you." Sophie's nightmares stopped. She laughed more, played more, and slowly returned to being the carefree 6-year-old she deserved to be. My mother visited often, helping with childcare and marveling at Sophie's courage. "That child saved you both," my mother said one evening as we watched Sophie play in the yard. "She saw what was happening and found a way to fight back." I agreed. Sophie had understood with her 6-year-old wisdom that adults were making decisions without knowing the full truth, so she'd captured the truth herself. The tablet she'd clutched so fiercely had become her weapon against injustice, and she'd wielded it with more effectiveness than any adult lawyer could have managed. Aaron called with updates periodically. The DA had indeed pressed charges against Kenneth for perjury and attempted fraud. He'd likely face fines and possibly probation. His lawyer withdrew from his case, Aaron informed me. Veronica was furious that he'd lied to her. She's cooperating with the investigation. Kenneth had tried to reach out to me several times, wanting to explain, wanting to apologize. I'd blocked his calls. The supervised visitation arrangement was our only required contact, and I intended to keep it that way. My focus was on rebuilding our life, helping Sophie heal, and moving forward. The custody battle had cost me financially and emotionally, but we'd survived. More than survived, we'd won. Not because I'd outmaneuvered Kenneth, but because my daughter had been brave enough to expose his lies. The nursing staff at the hospital had been incredibly supportive throughout the ordeal. When they learned what had happened, several colleagues contributed to help cover my legal fees. The outpouring of support reminded me that community and truth still mattered. Sophie's school teachers also stepped up, providing written statements about her emotional state during Kenneth's custody attempts. They'd noticed her anxiety, her withdrawn behavior, and her gradual improvement after the hearing. "She's like a different child now," her teacher, Mrs. Brennan, told me at a parent conference. "Happier, more confident, whatever was weighing on her is gone." I explained what Sophie had done, and Mrs. Brennan's eyes widened with amazement. "That child has more courage than most adults I know," she said. "You should be incredibly proud." I was. Every single day, I looked at Sophie and felt overwhelming gratitude and pride. She'd saved us both with her quiet bravery and unexpected wisdom. 3 months after the hearing, Kenneth's supervised visitations ended. Not because the court terminated them, but because Kenneth stopped showing up. He'd sent a letter through his new lawyer, stating he needed time to work on himself and wasn't ready to be a father right now. The letter was full of therapy speak and excuses, but the message was clear. He was abandoning Sophie. Part of me was angry on her behalf, but Sophie seemed almost relieved. "Does this mean I don't have to see Daddy anymore?" she asked when I explained. "Not if you don't want to," I confirmed. "The judge said you get to decide." She'd nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe when I'm bigger, when I understand more." Her maturity astounded me. She'd processed everything with remarkable clarity for someone so young. Kenneth's child support payments arrived inconsistently, often late. I didn't chase him for the money. We were managing, and I didn't want any excuse for him to claim ongoing involvement in our lives. My career continued steadily. The hospital promoted me to charge nurse, with better hours and increased pay. I could finally afford to move us to a small house with a yard, something Sophie had wanted. The day we moved in, Sophie ran through each room, claiming her space and planning where everything would go. "This is ours, right, Mommy? Just ours." "Just ours, baby." She'd grinned, hugging me tight. "Good. I like it being just us." I did too. The peace of not walking on eggshells, not managing Kenneth's moods or defending myself against baseless accusations, was worth more than any material comfort his income might have provided. Sophie started therapy to process everything she'd experienced. Her therapist, Dr. Hahn, was excellent, helping Sophie understand that recording the truth had been brave, but that adult problems weren't her responsibility. "She carries some guilt," Dr. Hahn explained to me during a parent session. "She feels responsible for her father's consequences." We worked on helping Sophie understand that Kenneth's actions had caused his consequences, not her honesty. It took time, but gradually, Sophie's guilt lessened. A year after the hearing, Sophie and I were thriving. She excelled in second grade, made close friends, and showed no lingering trauma from the custody battle. I'd started dadding again, cautiously. The experience with Kenneth had made me wary, but I refused to let his betrayal make me cynical about all relationships. One evening, Sophie and I were making dinner together when she brought up her father unprompted. "Do you think Daddy ever loved us, Mommy?" The question caught me off guard. I considered how to answer honestly without being cruel. "I think Daddy loved us in the way he was capable of," I said carefully. "But some people love themselves more than they love others. That doesn't mean we weren't worthy of better love." Sophie stirred the pasta sauce thoughtfully. "Brittany told him she didn't like kids. Why did he want me to live with him if his girlfriend didn't like kids?" "Because it wasn't really about wanting you there," I admitted. "It was about control and money." She nodded, processing. "That's really mean." "Yes, it is." "I'm glad the judge saw my video," Sophie said. "I'm glad the truth won." "Me too, baby, me too." That pink tablet sat on her bedroom shelf now, retired from its detective work. Sophie used a newer device for games and homework, but she'd asked to keep the old one. "It's important," she'd explained. "It reminds me that truth matters." Kenneth had moved away, we'd heard through mutual acquaintances. Somewhere out of state, starting over with people who didn't know his history. His family maintained occasional contact with Sophie through cards and birthday presents, but Kenneth himself had essentially disappeared from our lives. Sophie seemed content with that arrangement. She had my mother as a strong grandparent presence, and she didn't ask about her father anymore. The legal bills were finally paid off. Aaron had reduced his fees significantly after everything, stating he was honored to have helped us. The case had actually brought him significant publicity. Other mothers facing similar situations reached out seeking his representation. "You two changed how I approach custody cases," Aaron told me during our final meeting. "I always look deeper now, question the too perfect narratives. Sophie taught me that children often see truths that adults miss." I agreed. My 6-year-old had possessed wisdom that surpassed many adults. She'd seen through manipulation, recognized injustice, and found a way to fight back using the tools available to her. That pink tablet had become her sword and shield. As Sophie grew older, I knew I'd tell her the full story someday. How her courage had saved us both, how her insistence on truth had exposed deception, how her quiet recordings had spoken louder than any adult testimony. For now, we focused on normal life, homework, playdates, bedtime stories, and the comfortable rhythm of a household built on honesty and love rather than manipulation and control. Sometimes, late at night after Sophie was asleep, I'd replay the courtroom scene in my mind. The shock on Kenneth's face, the judge's anger, the moment everything shifted in our favor. Sophie had walked into that courtroom clutching her tablet, insisting she had something important to show. And she'd been right. Her video hadn't just shocked everyone present, it had demolished Kenneth's carefully constructed lies and revealed the truth he'd tried so hard to hide. My daughter had been 6 years old, facing down a system that often failed children, armed with nothing but truth and determination. And she'd won. That pink tablet would stay on her shelf, a reminder that even the smallest voices deserve to be heard, and that truth, when given the chance, always finds a way to emerge. 2 years after the hearing, Sophie was 8 and thriving. Kenneth sent a Christmas card that year, the first direct contact in months. It contained a generic message and a check for back child support. Sophie looked at the card briefly, then handed it to me. "You can throw it away if you want." "Don't you want to keep it?" She shook her head. "It doesn't mean anything. He's just trying to feel better about himself." Her perception astounded me still. At 8 years old, she understood emotional manipulation better than many adults. The check I deposited into Sophie's college fund. Kenneth's money would eventually benefit her education, even if his presence wouldn't benefit her childhood. Our little house had become a home filled with laughter, security, and unconditional love. Sophie had friends over regularly, participated in school plays, and showed no signs of the trauma she'd endured. That final hearing remained a turning point in both our lives. The day a 6-year-old girl had stood up in court with her pink tablet and changed everything. The day truth defeated manipulation, and courage triumphed over calculated cruelty. The day my daughter saved us both with a video nobody expected, showing everyone exactly who Kenneth really was when he thought no one was watching. Sophie never asked if she did the right thing. She knew she had. And that certainty, that moral clarity, would serve her well throughout her life.